Well, welcome back to Trauma Detectives, episode
4.
3. No, 4?
4.
Oh, it's gotten away from me.
Episode 4.
Oh, well, good afternoon, Adela.
Good afternoon, Stefan. I can count 4. This is episode 4.
All right, we're going strong. Well, what shall we talk about? What's hit the news?
Well, there's still a lot and too much, in my opinion. Talk about tough outcomes for children who are breaking the law.
But it's a topic it's a big topic at the moment.
It's a big topic, and it's being, I think, hung on to for various different reasons.
I think that there's lots of reasons for that. I think what we've done is looked at the link between a person's state of being and the state they're in due to early trauma and what that does to their impulsivity, reactivity, all of those things.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that saddens me when it sort of becomes a bit, maybe the word is popularised and misunderstood, is the fact that there are hundreds of people, kids and adults, out there in the world who have experienced those harms, who get very misunderstood by that approach, and they become demonised, and that really troubles me.
I think it can. I mean, it's hard for people to not demonise someone who they perceive as someone who's either hurt them or could hurt them.
Of course.
Like, I think that the closer you are to being the victim of a crime, of course, you have every right to be hurt and to want reprisal and all of that. I mean, when you look at... you were telling me about the news story from last night or from this morning?
Sometime this morning.
Yeah.
Where apparently it emerged that a woman was out of the blue stabbed some weeks back. But according to the media, it's been discovered that the woman who did the stabbing had been or was missing from a homeless shelter. Now, I hear that. I've done work supporting people who work with homeless people in programs that work very effectively with them. And I know that in that client group, a very large percentage, probably more than 50%, actually had backgrounds of out-of-home care. And they kind of graduate into a homelessness place. And I don't know what the fact of that story is, but again, it worries me.
No, it was pretty horrendous. I just saw I don't know why the video's released, but I did see it where she just stabbed a random pedestrian. And when you look at that, you think, well, there's clearly... that's not something that has a motive behind it.
Well,
it's not normal behaviour.
No.
So something's wrong. So something horrendous is happening to that victim who is being attacked and possibly killed. Now, she survived as far as I could read.
As far as I understand.
But at the same time, something is happening to the person doing it.
Yes.
And usually because something has happened. So I think, when I say, and you say these things, where the risk again, and we talked about this last time, of people saying, oh, well, you're just allowing or making excuses for murderous behaviour.
Absolutely not.
I think what we really want through all our conversations is for people to realise that if we understand the cause we may be able to change that trajectory earlier before we get to that point of someone possibly or actually being killed, you know. And again, it's not that, again, we have to be careful that, I mean, most people, most of my clients I've met over the years, and so many kids who have grown up who have been traumatised, don't grow up to be horrendous people doing bad things.
Well, not to that extreme.
No. But there'll be difficulties elsewhere. But, you know, when we look at a case like that, we have to think, well, is there something else going on? And then we hear that she actually was in a homelessness program.
According to the media.
I remember a few years ago you and I having a discussion about homelessness in relation to complex trauma, because do you remember I was contracted to another organisation that was asking me to do some training on complex trauma. And they had prepared the material for me to go over. I had to adjust it a little bit because it'd be interesting for us to talk about a definition of complex trauma.
Yes.
Because at the time, and I'm thinking about this, the woman in the news story, at the time I saw that complex trauma was being defined as a person who was experiencing trauma as well as homelessness and as well as all these other things. So the whole thing was very complicated. So it was very complex. But I think that, and I remember you and I having a conversation about it at the time, I don't know if you remember, it was a long time ago, but we talked about the idea of homelessness causing trauma, but also being a result of earlier trauma.
Yeah.
Remember?
Yes, I do remember that conversation.
So homelessness itself, what makes it complex trauma isn't that homelessness is the primary trauma or the first trauma. It's the fact that the trauma of being homeless is compounding the pre-existing trauma that goes all the way back to early childhood, and that is complex trauma.
Yes, and I really like Bruce Perry's definition and understanding of complex trauma as being other types of trauma impact on an already organised brain, but complex trauma, the term complex trauma, refers to the harm, the experiential harm that provides the organising environment for the brain. So we're talking about infancy. Bruce Perry has, in fact, also done research that talks about in utero trauma and its impacts. So we're talking about experiences that impact on the brain during the time that it is most busily forming. Well, it's the first 5 years of life. And 90% of the brain's development apparently occurs within those first 5 years of life.
I've often thought about it as, because people say, what do you mean by brain development? And I think that although there's a lot of neuroscientists who hate using computer analogies, but I think the closer and closer that AI gets to performing like humans, that's a topic for another day, but I think we can use, it's fair to use an analogy like this. I see the actual brain, the meat, the thing in your skull. That is there. That exists when we're born, and that exists in utero.
But it's still developing even after we're born.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the way it's developing, it's mostly through the connection of neural pathways.
Yes.
So we can see, and we're connecting new neural pathways every day. We're doing it
Every
right
second.
now. We learn things all the time. But I think before we can truly learn, we have to upload an operating system. So I think that's where the computer analogy comes in for me. You can buy a computer, but if it doesn't have Windows on it yet, you need to upload that first.
Yes.
Then it can learn and do documents and do a bunch of other stuff.
Yes, and it is complex trauma is affecting what you're using to upload to provide the environment for all other development. Yes.
Actually, can I stretch the analogy a little bit here?
Go on.
Do you remember in as the year 2000 approached?
Yes,
that there was a fear of the Y2K bug.
Yeah, and everybody thought that planes were going to fall out of the sky and all of that at midnight.
But the idea behind it is a little bit akin to developmental trauma because something went amiss in the development of the very first programs upon which all other programs are built.
Exactly.
And what went amiss, they realised, is that when they put dating systems in, it was only 2 digits for the year, the last 2 digits, because they couldn't fathom being in the 2000s, right? And so as we got to the year 98, 99, it was suddenly going to go to the year 0.
0, 0.
0, 0. So that was a little bit like there was a lot of repair that had to be done, but they had to go deep down into it and go back and repair the initial things. Otherwise we'd be chasing our tail, right? And I think it's a little bit like that. And it's hidden. No one can see it. What do you mean dates? I don't see dates. Like I don't see developmental trauma.
And you can only see it in terms of symptoms of it. You don't see, in fact, Bruce Perry and other neuropsychs and neuropsychologists, neuropsychiatrists have done brain scans and they have produced representations of brains that have atrophied really developmentally because they have not had the kinds of opportunities for development that one would hope. But one of the other interesting elements is that people find it really challenging to accept that that can be changed, right? That all those harmful effects can be altered by certain ways of intervening, but only if you first respect the fact that they are the way they are in the first place. So if you think, just a conversation's going to do it, it's not.
We just took a break to fix the microphones.
To fix technical problems.
Okay. So we were talking about...
the way in... Yes, I know what we were talking about. We were talking about how complex trauma impacts on the brain. Now, because our brains pretty much dictate most of what happens in our bodies functionally, it affects us in a number of ways. Right, so an individual who's suffering from the effects of complex trauma is affected neurobiologically, physiologically, because of the impact of the neurobiological functioning on the physiology of our bodies.
Yeah.
And psychologically, because, of course, that's going to affect your state of mind.
And the brain's part of the body, so it's still feeding off glucose and still running on everything.
All of that. Yeah. And then, of course, psychologically and emotionally. People talk as if it's only emotionally.
Or only cognitively, like only being a bad memory.
Yes. And, of course, this is actually quite interesting. I might tell this little story about the difference between triggered memory and ordinary memory. So you'll remember, Stefan, that I was doing some work for you up in Cairns.
Yes.
Many years ago.
Yes. You used to have to take the early morning plane.
Yes, and then I would come back on the Friday.
Yep.
I'd have been up there most of the week. So,
They were good times. Who else sends you to the tropics?
well, who else, indeed? But they were very good times, and I think we did some really great work up there. Now, one time, it was Friday afternoon, I'd checked in at the airport.
Yep.
I was sitting at the airport, having a drink, waiting to get on my flight and get back to Melbourne. All of a sudden, there was a big rush of people into the area where we were waiting to board. People were really frightened and screaming, and it was the time, you know, when people were quite worried about flying. And a guy came, I was just sitting there looking, thinking, what's going on? And a guy flashed a card at me and showed me that he was an air marshal.
Right.
And told me to hide.
Yeah.
I thought, okay. So I put myself out of harm's way. What I discovered was that a person had poured petrol over himself and was going to set himself alight. And it was something to do with custody dispute of some sort.
I remember it.
Yeah. So
I remember you telling me about it. I wasn't there.
The airport was, you know, absolutely flooded with the smell of petrol. It was everywhere. They sorted it out, but it resulted in a 2 or 3 hour delay. We all had to troop outside. The police came and took the guy away, and then we all had to go back through security and check in again. Not our checked-in bags, but our carry-on bags. And so, you know, and then we got on the plane. So as you know, I used to go up once every month. So a month later, I was coming out, you know, I was arriving for the next month's visit. And blow me down, it was still smelling of petrol there.
Yeah, yeah.
It was in my nose. I could smell it as clearly as anything. And I made a comment to one of the employees there as I walked through and said, my golly, I'm amazed that the smell of petrol is still so strong. And he looked at me as if I was a lunatic.
And he couldn't smell it.
He couldn't smell it.
But being there made you re-experience it.
I was not only thinking about it, it was in my nose. I could smell it.
That's a good example.
It's a really good example.
A simple one, you know. So if you can imagine that experience actually created that triggered state for you, can you imagine what it would be like when a person is, you know, horrifically under threat? And the other thing is that you knew when you could smell you could think and you go, oh, it's because I remember that thing happening and that's why I'm smelling it. It's because I know about trauma stuff and you know, and all
I had
of that.
a way of making sense of it.
But if you had experienced something that in which petrol was involved, but you were only 2 years old, chances are that you would have still, your body remembers it, but your brain can't make any sense of it.
No sense of it at all, and you're in it. You're not thinking about it. It's not over there like another memory is. It's in you. And
I was talking with someone the other day who works for another service, and we were talking about this, you know, a young man that we had mutually in our support and care who seems to have a lot of drama around him all the time and fearful things happening. So, you know, oh, such and such is coming after me and this is happening, and it's almost like we know what his early experiences are, but they're too early for him to remember. And so he must just feel this fear and threat
all the time.
You can't place it. So you invite events and look for those things that make it make sense, which of course could re-traumatize
Yeah.
you.
Well, and often do, and compound the trauma.
No doubt would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you think about that kind of experience and the multiple layers of harm and complex trauma that most of the children, particularly in out-of-home care, have experienced, you see the complexity and why it's called complex trauma, because it is layer upon layer upon layer of impact, and sometimes very difficult to decipher, and sometimes leads people to be quite frightening to others, and others' response merely exacerbates it because it's a natural response, but it doesn't help, and it doesn't help to unpack the trauma. And it's not only triggering. That's the other thing that people talk a lot about, being triggered. And yes, being triggered is in there, as anybody who's sat with a traumatised individual knows. They can experience something internally or externally, and they suddenly will heighten out of beyond belief for no apparent reason.
Because that person's body is in a state of threat. So it's not like being triggered to remember bad things.
Not necessarily. No.
I mean, it can be part of it. And I think that's what makes it so difficult. So you can know, I mean, a person can be triggered or in any state, and we can say, well, this child behaves like this, so what should we do about it? They say that, they'll ask us, what should we do about it? And usually we would say, well, there's two things that we need to address. One is ensuring that everyone's safe during those times, but that doesn't fix it. Like, that's managing it. We still need to do what tends to, and fix is the wrong word, but this is what therapeutic care. What is therapeutic? Are all the things that you do when the crisis isn't happening.
Absolutely.
That's the thing. If
proactively.
Yeah, I just remembered something, but if I'll to go back to my Y2K bug analogy, right? A lot of people prepared for it. But it wasn't going to be fixed, right? Everyone was preparing for Armageddon. Like, do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
Because some people went really crazy with it. Like, I just thought, we'll probably be okay. Do you know, on that night, that New Year's Eve, rolling into the year 2000,
people wouldn't fly on planes. They thought the planes
were
going to fall out of the sky.
I remember it really well. I was at the Melbourne Arts Centre.
Right.
And I was working on a puppetry show, a big visual theatre piece. Not a little Punch and Judy, but it was quite a big visual theatre piece, and I was involved in puppetry at the time. And it was quite a big show, and that night, New Year's Eve, we did a show that meant that at New Year's Eve, we would be in our dressing rooms, which were, I think it's something like 7 stories down underground.
Okay.
Now, every door was electronic with a swipe card. The whole place was computerized, right? One of the...
Oh, dear.
one of the guys on the cast, right, his name is Johnny. We called him Johnny Rocket. How are you, Johnny Rocket? It's been a long time, if you're listening.
I don't know you.
Anyway, Johnny Rocket was great because he was the one performing artist who actually... lived on his own farm. He had a sustainable farm with his family, grew everything, raised everything. I think he had draft horses instead of tractors. Like, he was really into it. Anyway, on that New Year's Eve, earlier that day, we all had our individual dressing rooms, and Johnny Rocket comes up to me and he goes, "You want to see something?" And I said, "Sure, Johnny." He goes, "Have a look at my dressing room." So I went, had a look in his dressing room, and there were huge buckets full of rice, lentils. There were canisters of gas. There was a cooking stove. There was tons of water and an axe.
in case you had to break the door down.
Yeah, so I said, Johnny, what's this? We're in a dressing room at the Victorian Arts Centre in Melbourne, right? And he goes, Y2K, mate. What do you think's going to happen when all the computers shut down and we're down here on New Year's? We're going to be stuck here. And he said, God knows for how long. And I said, well, I guess we'll
He was
go up the
about
fire
to become
escape
king
or whatever.
of the universe,
right?
wasn't he?
So,
or at least Melbourne.
So, I think I sniggered a bit. And he said, you know what? You can all laugh at me. But after midnight, who's going to be coming to me to survive?
Well,
because I'll have everything that you'll want.
Yeah, interesting point and a very good analogy in terms of understanding therapeutic care, because people often talk in terms of a range of services. So not just out-of-home care for kids, but homeless shelters, all those sorts of places. People often are very concerned, rightly so, about safety of staff.
Yeah.
And they make a lot of provision for that, provisions that are quite complex of themselves.
Because that threat is real, but
the threat is real.
But if we don't actually gather enough knowledge and skill to do something about what's causing it,
exactly,
we're going to be perpetually
yes.
looking out for that threat and crisis.
Exactly.
And guess what? We then become the ones who are hypervigilant and chronically under threat.
Exactly, and we can't co-regulate with the young people or the people in any setting to actually ameliorate the state that they're in.
It's a practical way to looking at the concept of parallel process, right, that you mentioned before, where suddenly we're in it too. How can I help you if I'm not safe or if I don't feel safe?
Exactly, and if we are really serious about managing risk, making the community safer, we need to actually address causes. If we keep chasing our tails, addressing impacts and symptoms, that's not enough. We have to, in our work, address causes. That is truly the best, almost the only way of actually being able to create safety for people who are really seriously wanting to help troubled people.
It's what especially, I guess some time ago, they're starting to improve when I think about behaviour support plans are almost always a kind of a crisis plan. Well, they used to be. Now there's a little bit more work into it. Now they're calling it specialist behaviour support, whereas actually should be all of it. And if you remember what behaviour support plans used to be, they used to be a list of crises and unwanted behaviours and what to do when it happens.
When it happens.
Yeah, yes. What to do when it happens. Yeah. But then you kind of just get along with life and then suddenly it happens.
And it will happen.
But it's as if it's just random. It's like a random event. It'll just happen. So when it does, I don't know, duck, put on a helmet and give them a punishment or whatever it is.
And guess what? They don't work.
No.
And the ones that work...
Not work to decrease it.
No.
They might work to decrease the risk.
In the moment.
At the moment.
In the moment.
Right?
But they won't do anything to render it less likely to happen again.
Next time.
The best, in fact, I would say the only way to ensure that you're actually working on the cause rather than the effect is to do proactive work. You don't wait for things to get bad. You work proactively because you know what's behind it. So what you're doing is creating the safety, the predictability and the stability for that hyperarousal to eventually become lowered. And once that's become lowered, the better part, the more complicated and sophisticated part of the brain can actually enter into conversations about things that are happening.
A few years ago, I had an epiphany as a practitioner because I had been for a long time giving advice about regulating dysregulated kids, and which was fine. Yes, if someone's dysregulated, you try and regulate them. What I realised was that I was running on the completely wrong premise, because the premise I was running on was that they will be regulated. But when I realised, especially with those who have encountered severe neglect and maternal stress in utero and in infancy, will tend to have extremely high arousal baselines, physiological arousal, high cortisol and heart rate. And then you realise, well, if the baseline is high, why are we only regulating them when they look dysregulated?
Because they're even higher then.
Yeah. So ever since then, I've been practicing this myself and advising people quite often to say that we ensure that we employ regulating strategies and activities when the child appears calm.
Calm, exactly.
And then you actually have a much better chance of impacting on the actual baseline itself.
Because let's say 0 to 100, when the child actually appears to be calm, they're still probably over 50%.
And they're masking it very well because they've had to survive.
But that it's a reasonable assumption that they're still way up the scale. Actually, I've got a story that demonstrates that from practice. There was a young woman at a place I was working who said to somebody in the management stream that they wanted to understand why they kept losing it, in their own words. And the person she spoke to said, I think I know exactly the person that you could talk to. And she had thought of me. I was doing some consultancy work with the organisation. She said, would you do that? And I said, of course I would. And we set up a time. I met the young woman, and then after I'd met her, we all went out for lunch. I made a time and I said, we're going to talk about, what you wanted to understand. So I went to the house that she lived in. She was sitting on the couch, all wrapped up in one of those soft minky blankets. And we just, I had a bit of a conversation where I was saying, I understand that you want to get a sense of what's going on in your brain when that happens, and why it happens, because you don't feel you're controlling it. Is that right? She said, yeah, I just lose it. And I said, okay, so tell me, some of the things that make you lose it. And she actually went straight into, it was like she just cut into a line of thinking and talked to me about some pretty negative comments made by her parent at times in the past. But obviously, that's where she was at in her mind. So I just let her go with the story, and then I explained to her about what happens in the brain. So it was really a bit of a psychoeducation session. Helped her think about how she felt in her body a lot of the time, and what being heightened meant, and how it made, like, your heart would be beating faster and all sorts of other physical things. And then we'd been talking for about maybe an hour, and I thought, well, an hour will do it, for a first session. And I started to sort of put my things together to go. And she said, "Oh, no, don't go." I said, "Oh, why?" She said, "This is the calmest I've ever felt." And we had actually, during conversation, been talking about heart rate and stuff like that. So I said, "Well, that's really interesting. You just told me this is the calmest you've ever felt. I wonder what your heart's doing. Shall we check?" And you probably know, people probably know that you've got an app on the phone. You can put your finger up against the lens of the camera and it'll tell you your heart rate. So she put her finger on, and I said to the staff member who was sitting there with us, "What's it say? What would your guess be?"
Well, it depends. I mean, I would know that it's probably high.
Yeah. So the calmest, at the calmest she'd ever felt, her heart rate was 110 beats a minute.
Yeah. So that's her state of being.
That's her
Zen state, because she's only got extremely high heart rate to compare it to.
So we had a conversation then. I said, "Well, look, before I leave, maybe what we need to do is check your heart rate several times through the day when you're doing different things, and you can see when it's lower."
And I imagine that it would have taken a whole lot of shame away from her, because it's like, oh, I'm not a bad person.
You're not a bad person. Yeah.
I just have a high arousal, a high heart rate.
And they did that for a period of time, which was only one step of many, but it was actually quite a valuable step, and helping her to understand that it was stuff that was going on in her body.
And the other thing is that I imagine that for a long time people would have focused on the losing it part. So what wouldn't have helped? If she's losing it because of her physiology, because she's actually loses control over her body and therefore her brain, that nothing like saying to her, let's get you signing a behaviour contract.
Which is very cognitive.
If you lose it, if you lose it, you don't get this special thing, and if you don't lose it for a week, then you get a prize. So that would actually, not meaning to, would add a whole lot of shame, because she won't be able to do it.
She will not be. It's setting her up to fail.
Instead, what those people would do would be like, well, they'd get ready for the crisis, like Johnny Rocket did, right? And making sure that everyone's going to be safe if she does lose it. In the meantime, to be able to lower her baseline when she feels okay. And like she herself knew when she said, "No, now you stay, because now I'm at my baseline. I want more of this.
Yes, exactly.
This is going to work really well for me." And I think it's always when we get stuck on just the behaviour itself, we miss the point, don't we?
We do. And I think if there's any message that I think is important to get across, it is this message, which is that people who have experienced complex trauma in infancy, in utero, infancy and childhood don't know it, mostly. If only they did know it, but they don't know it.
No.
And they feel immense shame because they're buffeted around by the impacts of what they've experienced. And inadvertently, with highly cognitive approaches, we exacerbate that because we're talking about the wrong thing. And we're waiting for an event before we do anything. Whereas it's like we know the events. It's in the wings.
Sometimes I think, I mean, that's the whole thing about, I mean, I guess that's what we mean by our, silly name of saying trauma detectives, is that you've got to investigate and go, well, what else is there?
Yeah.
And, I think it's because you mentioned our work in Cairns that I just remembered another. This is an interesting case from our time back then. I don't know if you worked with this one or not. I'm pretty sure you did. So we had this boy who was in the therapeutic care program, and the care staff were struggling with the fact that this boy was constantly putting not only other kids down, but constantly putting down anybody, any of the care staff. So he'd call them names and always really putting people down. And the one thing he would say, he'd call them a dumbass. The problem that he had was that he lived in a house with other kids who were also in care, and he was the smallest. And he was a little smarter than a lot of the other ones. But if they didn't do something, or they couldn't achieve something, or work something out on the television or whatever it was, he'd just say, "Oh, you dumbass. You know, you can't do it, you dumbass." And it would actually often lead to a violent altercation. It was actually, now...
Because he was surrounded by kids who were prone to dysregulating.
That's right. So when I went up there, I was doing that work, so you weren't there yet. So, and they said, "Oh, we've got a plan," because rather than addressing, they thought the behaviour was the altercation, the physical altercation. They said, "Oh no, we're going to be smart and actually deal with the fact that he's putting people down." So we started to step in the right direction, but not quite, right? Because they had a chart, of course, and they'd count, whenever he called someone a dumbass, they'd talk to him and say it was not appropriate, which is great. We've got to do a bit of corrective work. And then if he could not call anyone names for so long, he would get a star on his chart, and then so many stars, and he'd get the prize at the end of the week. So what do you think was the success of that?
Zilch.
Yeah, correct. So anyway, I just thought, I didn't quite have the answer yet. I just thought, I want to know what's going on here. I didn't know. It was by chance that I discovered something. Because I was doing the assessment for the therapeutic plan, for the behaviour plan and all of that, whatever they were calling it at the time. So I wanted to meet the parents. And I had to go on the weekend because the boy was seeing his father on the weekend. And I met the father, who was quite rough around the edges, had been quite violent, so this is why it had to be a supervised time together. And guess what I noticed?
He was calling him a dumbass.
Absolutely. The father was calling the boy a dumbass, non-stop, which just constantly put him down. And I just thought, wow, I know this. I started formulating an idea. We got together with the staff team, and we sort of decided together on a strategy just to see if it did anything. We decided to record the number of times that he actually said put down words to other kids and to staff, and it was mostly towards other kids, to make a note of it. Like everyone had a little thing. I think they made a note of it on their phone or something like that. And then we'd count them. But then we thought, okay, if this is happening, it's not just because he's learnt it. It's because he's been extremely invalidated. It's invalidating to be called a dumbass every day of your life by your own parents.
Well, particularly by someone who is meant to love you.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So we decided on only one strategy. We forget the incentives, forget telling him not to do it, forget everything. The only thing that we decided to do was just flood him in validation every day. Not only that, we wanted him to experience what it looked like. So it wasn't about praise. We didn't have to give him praise. It was about validating him. It was about seeing him, using his ideas, validating how he feels, and saying good things. No matter
that was
what.
a smart thing to come up with, that kind of thing.
Yes,
To
yeah,
him.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. And also validating each other. Now, there's one thing that happens in Australian culture, we talked about this before, is that Australians can be very sarcastic to each other and put each other down. Now, two adults know what that means.
Yeah.
But kids, especially kids who've not yet developed real abstract thinking, can't really manage that double entendre type stuff. So we said, okay, a rule in the house.
None of that. Yeah.
Single entendres only.
Yes.
Right? So everything had to be concrete, and we are to say nice things to each other. And it's a bit, I had to say, look, it's going to feel a bit corny, but deal with it. Right? This is what we're going to do. We're going to actually create a validating environment in the home, which is going to feel strange because it's going to be strangely over the top. That's all we did.
Yeah.
And we continued counting the dumbass and all the put downs. By only a week later, we had almost no incidents of it. Not only that, the violent incidents had almost completely stopped. So we had less risk in the house, less danger. We didn't have him putting people down. And weirdly, we only did it through just validating him and each other. There was no, let's do a course in tackling him. And do you know what was funny? I actually got the father on board with it.
Yeah, well, you can do that once you've got it going.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
but what I did with the father is, I wouldn't call it deceptive, but I wasn't completely honest. I didn't say, hey, I've noticed that you put him down a lot.
Well,
because obviously something's happened to the father too, you
exactly.
know, and I wanted to be respectful towards him. The way I put it to him was, do you know, your son's doing really well. I wanted you to know because I've noticed how much you love him and how much you want to know how well he's doing. And I said to him, we're trying something new. It's a bit weird, but what we're going to do is not put him down, even if you're joking, not even that. And we just say a couple of nice things. You know, but we need everyone to do it. Do you want to do it too? So he said, all right, what do I say and what do I do? I said, okay, you know, just so we've got continuity and we're all doing the same thing. So he came on board.
That's good.
And then he saw the results. So yeah, it was an interesting, it made me think of another example of like, all right, rather than either punishing him for saying the rude words.
Never going to get anywhere.
Or even giving him rewards for not saying it, doesn't get to the core of it.
Doesn't. And, I mean, it was interesting that you really had to see how it had come about in action.
I just happened to see it.
Yeah, to see that and to understand the core of what was problematic for him. And it worked.
Oh, look, the light bulbs that went on in my head as soon as I heard it, I just thought, oh, wow, it's even the same words.
I think that, they're two really good examples of what we mean in terms of how to work with children who've experienced complex trauma. And I think the thing also is important to say is that you don't always get quick results. You sometimes have to wait.
Usually we have to wait a lot longer.
A lot longer.
But you know the
and
other
you just
thing
have to keep going.
The other thing that I want to remark on is that the story that I just told with that group of staff who were amazing.
Oh, yeah,
they were remarkable people.
I remember them.
That therapeutic care isn't the care staff doing their care and me coming in and doing the therapy.
Yeah, it is not.
It's not that. It's through our conversations and what I discovered. And I apply the framework. They come on board. Therapeutic care is that the care itself becomes the therapy.
Exactly. It's got to be done in that way in a therapeutic milieu, because if you think about the often years of harm that have occurred in the development of complex trauma, one or two different experience is not going to change it, because there are certain, and Bruce Perry talks a lot about this, there's a certain amount of repetition that's required to change a neural pathway. If you're going to change the neural pathway for dumbass, you may have to, I mean, that was a really rapid response and that was fantastic, but you might have had to do it for 6 months or more.
Well, yes, that is the rest of is the rest of the story, and I think this gets back to, because we'll probably occasionally, you talked about Hurstbridge and other therapeutic care programs in the past. I think what gets mistaken now, and I've seen this recently in a couple of programs in New South Wales and one in Victoria, where there is a therapeutic care program, but they've almost relying on an older paradigm.
Yes, with a therapist.
Where you've got good care, but you've got the therapeutic specialist is doing one-on-one sessional therapy, and it's actually not the way that we've ever got best results.
No.
We get the best results when you bring everyone on board.
Absolutely. And
the therapist is using the carers as a proxy for them when they're not there.
Exactly. There is often, I think, in the field even, a misunderstanding that having a therapeutic specialist assigned to a house makes it therapeutic, but it doesn't necessarily, because, as you so rightly point out, the change arises and the therapeutic input arises from the repetition of a message from all of the players in the environment around the
You know how you were quoting Perry and talking about the difference between complex trauma and type 1 PTSD?
Yes.
When you said that in complex or developmental trauma, that trauma provides the environment for the brain's organisation and development.
That is the key.
Therefore, for healing to occur, we have to provide the environment for that new organisation of the brain.
Yeah.
And I think we have to see that the environment is the therapist.
Yes.
The environment meaning the relational environment.
There's a beautiful quote from one of the places that I read about when I was putting together the model for Hurstbridge. It's a place called Chaddock in Chicago. The woman who runs the place is a woman called Karen Buckwalter, who in fact did some training that I went to when I was on holiday in London one time. Absolutely magical woman who really gets it. And it's a quote that I actually put into the Hurstbridge model or the proposal for it. She, without reading it, the essence of it is the magic happens on the floor. That's a direct quote from her. The magic happens on the floor in the relational interactions.
Exactly.
And in the repetition of the messages.
So if it's not relational and consistent, it's not going to be an effective intervention.
It is not.
You've got to have those two elements plus a whole bunch of other ones.
Yeah, and interestingly, picking up on the point of homelessness, as I did at the start, one of the most effective and successful homelessness services that I know of in Victoria, in Melbourne anyway, is a place that's run by Sacred Heart Mission, and it's called J2 number 2 SI, which is a short version of Journey to Social Inclusion. So it's for adults, and they operate on a very similar model in a way, because when the person begins it's a 3-year program, when they begin working with the program, they've got one person working with them to create trust and a feeling of
It's not just whoever's
safety.
on shift.
No, it's one person who is earmarked to work with them. And then in the 2nd year, they introduce another person. And in the 3rd year of the program, the person works with the whole team. Now, that takes a little bit longer, but we're talking about adults in that situation. But that program is so successful. It was originally funded by the federal government, and I'm talking about the early 2000s. The federal government, generally speaking, often seeds programs, funds them for 3 years, but doesn't continue beyond that. It's their model. They went for quite a substantial period of time unable to find funding. And then they discovered these things called social impact bonds, and they got onto them, and social impact bonds funded one program, which I had the good fortune to be involved with, providing clinical supervision to the case managers, which was an absolute joy, because they were using such an effective model. It was really exciting to be a part of it. Then that was so successful that I think they're running about 7 or 8, maybe even more now, simultaneous programs running at different stages, but again, always coming up with fabulous outcomes, and people who stay in housing for substantial periods of time. And, harking back to the conversation we were having at the start of this episode, there are multiple reasons why individuals find it impossible to live in settings for a period of time, and they're not all about finances. If we're talking about individuals who've experienced complex trauma, which we often are, they can't get along with other people. They can't tolerate other people. They can't manage the to and fro of relational interaction. And so to have a program where most people go into accommodation and stay in it for 3 years and become stable is a fabulous outcome. So no wonder they've got 7 or 8 programs running. I highly commend them. I think they're excellent. And this is an approach that could work extremely well in terms of transitioning young people out of residential care.
Especially, those who are at risk of homelessness.
Yep.
We have a long way to go, but I think that the hope lies in the evidence of existing programs that work, because I think that there's, throughout even our own field, that there's often a sense of despair at, what can you do?
Yes.
Because there's a lot we can do, and there's a lot that's being done that actually works. And I think it is about seeing as we spoke about in the first episode, we talked about return for investment, and
exactly.
and in convincing people in politics and people who are making decisions about where public funds are going, that it is actually a sound return for investment,
Absolutely.
not only a social investment, but it's actually an economic and financial one as well.
And the, I mean, there's the social capital as well, right? So
Yeah, that's what I mean by social investment.
That is important,
Mm.
and important to realise that it's not just about having a roof over your head. It's about being able to live with yourself and live with others. If you can't live with yourself, you're not going to be able to live with others.
Mm.
The way in which people are interacting with the magic happens on the floor. The magic happens in the relational interactions that repeat and repeat and repeat the same patient messages. And I use the word patient because patience is incredibly important.
I can see the difference in even small companies that are providing support, say through NDIS. I've been involved with a small company based down in Geelong Way called Surf Coast Connections, and they do a fantastic job and they are inadvertently really doing good trauma-informed support work, because the first thing I notice is that their relationships with young people that they're working with, they're meaningful relationships, and the relationships they have with each other in their presence as well is very easy, and I think that there are simple ways that bits and pieces of program. There are big programs like that that are doing the whole lot. There are small programs that contribute to existing programs that they do their bit. You know what I mean? It would be interesting to do a critical overview of some programs as to why have some programs not worked. I'd like, it might be good to have a discussion. Maybe it's negative to look at the ones that haven't worked, but we need to visit the ones.
Understand
why do we continue to fund the types of programs that inevitably do not work?
Yeah, well, I think that's a very important question, because it gets back to the point you just made about return for investment. Because if you understand what doesn't work and you understand what does work, then it's a fair question to say, why do you continue to use an approach that you know isn't going to work? Why do you fund it? Why does the government fund it?
Especially when we have the knowledge
about what does work.
That boggles me.
Yes.
But I think let's end on a boggle.
Let's end on a boggle. And I suppose I'll just add a little bit to the boggle, because, as we both know, the 13 pilots that were established between 2007 and 2011 were evaluated, and were evaluated with excellent outcomes for the young people involved. So Hurstbridge was but one of them, and the other 12 were all houses in the community. They weren't on 33 acres out in the bush, and they had equally successful outcomes.
But as we've mentioned before, we have continued to evaluate programs that have been developed on the back of those,
and continue to
ever
get those.
since, right? So for the last 15 years, and they continue to show good outcomes. So, so they are there, but we can explore that.
Well,
I think
next time
on the next one.
Well, my boggle is, it's a question. I'm putting it out there. Why do they not fund more of what we know works?
I'm going to leave that question hanging. Yeah.
It's a real question.
Well, thanks for the chat, Adela.
Thank you, Stefan. As always, you get the magnifying glass out and we have a conversation, and we go in all sorts of different directions. But
I don't think people know this, but I don't think people. I wonder if they realise that we do zero preparation for these conversations. We just chat.
Yeah.
and it all
Maybe
comes
not.
out.
Yeah.
It's we do have a genuinely good chat.
Well, as I've often said to people, I could talk underwater.
Yeah.
The only thing that stops me talking underwater is that I can't swim, so I don't like the water on my face.
No, no. And you need me to stop you talking.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
On that note,
On that note,
see you all
bye
next
bye.
time.
See you next time.